Dr. Crixel clicked her mandibles together as she reviewed the data on her holographic display. The Gathrix scientist had spent 15 cycles studying various species across the galaxy, but nothing had prepared her for what she was seeing now. The humans were doing it again. On the observation screen, a human female was feeding a creature that could have eaten her in 2 bites. The Vorath, a large predator from the jungle world of Tessix 7, had been captured 3 weeks ago for study. Every other species that had tried to approach it had been attacked. The creature had injured 2 Gathrix handlers and killed a maintenance drone. But this human, Sarah Chen, was sitting cross-legged in front of its cage, pushing pieces of meat through the bars with her bare hands. "She is going to die," said Dr. Venn, Crixel's research partner. The Mallory was tall and thin, with large eyes that blinked slowly as he watched the screen. "The Vorath will bite her arm off." "That is what I thought too," Crixel replied. "But watch." The Vorath moved closer to the bars. Its 6 legs made soft clicking sounds on the floor of its enclosure. Its mouth opened, showing rows of sharp teeth. But instead of attacking, it gently took the meat from Sarah's hand. Then it made a low, rumbling sound and pressed its head against the bars. Sarah reached through and scratched the creature behind what might have been its ears. "Impossible," Dr. Venn whispered. "The Vorath does not allow touch. The species information says they are solitary hunters who attack anything that comes near them." "The species information was written before humans joined the galactic community," Crixel said. "I am beginning to think we need to rewrite many things." This was not the first strange thing Crixel had seen since humans had arrived at the Galactic Research Station. In the 3 months since the first human team had come to work alongside the alien scientists, everything had changed. And it was not just the dangerous animals that responded to them differently. Crixel remembered the day the humans first arrived. There were 12 of them, a mix of scientists, engineers, and support staff. They had stepped off their transport ship with wide eyes and bigger smiles. Most species, when they first encountered the dozens of different aliens on the station, showed fear or caution. The humans showed excitement. The first thing they did was try to learn everyone's names. This was harder than it sounded. Gathrix names were series of clicks and whistles. Mallory names were so long that they took several minutes to say fully. The crystalline Vorti did not have names at all, only identification frequencies. But the humans tried anyway. When they could not pronounce something, they asked if they could use a nickname. When they could not hear a frequency, they assigned a human name that somehow felt right. Dr. Venn had been called Vincent ever since. He pretended to be annoyed by it, but Crixel had noticed he responded to the name faster than his real one now. "We need to document this properly," Crixel said, making notes on her datapad. "The human ability to form bonds with other species is unlike anything in our records. It is not just communication or cooperation. It is something deeper." "Pack bonding," Dr. Venn said. "That is what the humans call it. I looked it up in their cultural database." Pack bonding. Humans evolved as social creatures on their homeworld. They lived in family groups and tribes. They formed strong emotional connections not just with each other, but with other species they encountered. They domesticated wolves, turning predators into companions. They kept prey animals as pets instead of food. They formed partnerships with creatures that should have been their enemies. Crixel considered this. Many species are social. The Gathrix live in hive structures. The Mallory have their bonded pairs, but we do not extend this to other species. "No," Dr. Venn agreed. "We do not, but humans do. They extend their social instincts to anything they encounter. They form emotional attachments to plants. They feel affection for machines. They name their vehicles and talk to them. They will adopt any creature as family if given the chance." On the screen, Sarah was now lying on the floor next to the Vorath's cage. The creature had settled down on its side, matching her position. It was making soft sounds that Crixel's translator could not interpret, but which seemed peaceful. She is singing to it, Dr. Venn said, surprised. A human lullaby. Can you imagine what this could mean? Crixel asked quietly. For centuries, we have struggled with interspecies cooperation. Wars, misunderstandings, isolation. Different species cannot work together because we cannot connect with each other. But humans connect with everything. You want to study them. I want to understand them. If we could learn how they do this, if we could find a way to teach it to other species, it could change the entire galaxy. Dr. Venn's large eyes blinked. That is a very big goal. Yes, but someone needs to try. Crixel saved her notes and began drafting a research proposal. She would need funding, approval from the station council, and cooperation from the humans themselves. But she had a feeling they would say yes. Humans, she had learned, usually said yes when someone asked them to help. 2 days later, Crixel presented her proposal to the station council. The council chamber was a large circular room with seating arranged for the 12 species that worked on the station. Crixel stood in the center, her presentation displayed on the walls around her. I propose a formal study of human-pack bonding behavior, she said, with the goal of developing methods to improve interspecies cooperation throughout the galactic community. Counselor Threx, the station commander, leaned forward. The Draven was massive, with thick armor plates covering his body and small eyes that missed nothing. Explain why this is necessary. Species have been working together for thousands of cycles without understanding human psychology. With respect, Counselor, have we? The Gathrix and the Vorti have not spoken directly in 200 cycles due to a misunderstanding over territory. The Mallory refused to work with the Kreth because of an ancient war that ended before any of us were born. We tolerate each other. We cooperate when we must, but we do not connect. And you believe humans can change this? I believe humans already are changing this. In 3 months, they have done what none of us could do in centuries. They have made friends. There was murmuring around the council chamber. The word friends did not translate well into many languages. For some species, the concept barely existed. I have observed their interactions, Crixel continued. Human Sarah Chen has formed a working relationship with the dangerous Vorath specimen that no one else could approach. Human engineer Marcus Webb has organized social gatherings that include members of 6 different species. Human scientist Dr. James Okonkwo has convinced the Vorti researchers to share data they have kept secret for decades, simply by asking nicely and remembering their identification frequencies. How do they do this? Asked Counselor Vix, the Mallory representative. That is what I want to find out. If we can understand the mechanism behind human-pack bonding, we might be able to develop protocols that allow other species to form similar connections. The council discussed the proposal for an hour. There were objections and concerns. Some counselors worried about the resources required. Others questioned whether alien psychology could be changed at all. But in the end, the proposal was approved. Crixel had her study. Now she just needed to find humans willing to be studied. She found Sarah Chen in the station's garden dome, a large enclosed space where plants from dozens of worlds grew together. Sarah was sitting on a bench, watching a small furry creature run through the vegetation. Crixel recognized it as a cat, one of the earth animals that humans had brought with them. Dr. Crixel, Sarah said with a smile, please sit down. Whiskers won't bother you. He's very friendly. Crixel looked at the cat with uncertainty. Friendly was a relative term, but she sat down anyway. I have a request, she said. I would like to study you. Sarah laughed. That's direct. Study me how? Your ability to form bonds with other species. It is remarkable. I want to understand it to see if it can be taught to others. Pack bonding. You want to study pack bonding? Yes, is that the correct term? Sarah was quiet for a moment. The cat jumped into her lap and she began stroking its fur automatically. It's not really something we think about, she said. It's just how we are. We see something and we want to connect with it. We want to understand it, care for it, be its friend. But why? What is the evolutionary advantage? Survival, I guess. Humans are not the strongest or fastest species on Earth. We're not the biggest or the scariest, but we're really good at making friends. We befriended wolves and turned them into dogs. We befriended horses and they carried us across continents. We even befriended bacteria and taught them to make cheese and bread for us. You befriended bacteria. Well, we domesticated them. Same principle, Sarah smiled. The point is, we survived by cooperating, not just with each other but with everything around us. We made the whole world our pack. Crixel made notes on her datapad. And this extends to alien species. You feel the same drive to connect with us. Of course, why wouldn't we? You're interesting and different and you have so much to teach us. And besides, Sarah scratched the cat under its chin, everyone needs friends. The cat purred. Crixel watched it, fascinated by the small sound of contentment. I will help with your study, Sarah said. We all will, I think. Humans like being understood, and we like helping others learn to connect. It's kind of our thing. Thank you, Crixel said. I believe this could change everything. Maybe it will, Sarah replied. Or maybe it will just make the galaxy a little friendlier. Either way, it sounds like a good start. The cat stretched and yawned, showing tiny teeth that were not threatening at all. Crixel found herself reaching out to touch its fur. It was soft and warm. The cat purred louder. Perhaps, Crixel thought, she was already beginning to understand. The study began the next week. Crixel set up observation equipment in key locations around the station, places where humans regularly interacted with other species. The cafeteria, the recreation areas, the research labs, the docking bays. Everywhere humans went, they left a trail of changed relationships behind them. Marcus Webb, the human engineer, was the first subject of focused study. He was a large man with dark skin and a booming laugh that echoed through the corridors. Within days of his arrival, he had learned the names of every maintenance worker on the station, regardless of species. He remembered birthdays, family situations, favorite foods. He asked about people's lives and actually listened to the answers. Crixel watched him in the engineering bay, where a team of Gathrix, Mallory, and humans worked together on station systems. Before Marcus, the Gathrix and Mallory had barely spoken except when necessary. They worked in separate sections, communicated through formal messages, and left as soon as their shifts ended. Now they ate lunch together. How did you do this? Crixel asked Marcus during an interview session. He shrugged his big shoulders. I just invited everyone to eat with me. First day, nobody came. Second day, one Gathrix showed up because she was curious about human food. Third day, she brought a friend. By the end of the first week, we had a regular lunch group. But why did they stay? Because it was fun, I guess. We talked about stuff, not work, just life. I asked Clicker about her family. He used the nickname he had given the Gathrix, and she asked me about Earth. Then Tomas, the Mallory engineer, joined in because he wanted to know about human sports. Now we have game nights every week. Game nights. We play cards and board games. I had to teach everyone the rules, but they picked it up fast. Turns out Mallory are really good at poker. Those big eyes make it hard to read their expressions. Crixel noted this down. The humans created social situations, low-pressure environments where other species could interact without the stress of work or formal obligations. They used shared activities to build connections. Is this intentional? She asked. Do you plan these interactions to build relationships? Marcus laughed. No, not really. I just get lonely if I don't have people to hang out with. And I saw that everyone on the station seemed kind of isolated. Different species don't mix much, you know. So I thought, why not invite everyone to have some fun together? Life's better with friends. There it was again. That simple assumption that everyone could be friends, that species barriers were just obstacles to be overcome rather than fundamental divisions. Humans did not see the galaxy the way other species did. They saw potential connections everywhere. Dr. James Okonkwo was different from Marcus. Where the engineer was loud and social, the physicist was quiet and thoughtful, but he had his own way of forming bonds. James had been assigned to work with the Vorti, the crystalline beings who communicated through patterns of light and vibration. The Vorti were famously isolated. They found organic species difficult to work with and preferred to keep to themselves. Previous attempts to integrate them into cross-species teams had failed. But James had succeeded. How? Crixel asked him, genuinely puzzled. The Vorti refused to share research with anyone for decades. Now they send you their data every morning. James smiled softly. I learned their language. We all have translators. Language is not the barrier. I don't mean their words. I mean their language of meaning. The Vorti communicate through light patterns, but the patterns carry emotional content, not just information. When they share data, they're not just giving you numbers. They're sharing a piece of themselves. Previous researchers took the data and ignored the emotion. They treated the Vorti like machines. And you did not. I paid attention to the patterns. I learned to read the feelings behind them. When Prisma, he used the human name he had given to his Vorti colleague, sends me research, I respond to both the data and the emotion. I thank them not just for the information, but for the trust it represents. You treat them like people. They are people, just different kinds of people. Every species has feelings, even if they express them differently. Humans are good at reading feelings. We've had thousands of years of practice reading body language and facial expressions from species that don't look like us. Dogs, cats, horses. Now we just apply the same skills to aliens. Crixel found this remarkable. Humans had evolved to read emotional cues across species boundaries. They did not just communicate with other beings, they empathized with them. Can this be taught? She asked. I think so. It's mostly about paying attention and caring enough to try. Most species don't bother because they assume other species are too different to understand. Humans assume the opposite. We assume that if something is alive, we can probably connect with it somehow. The study continued for weeks. Crixel documented hundreds of interactions, analyzed patterns, and conducted interviews with humans and the aliens they had befriended. A picture began to emerge of how human-pack bonding worked. First, humans approached other beings with openness and curiosity rather than fear or caution. They assumed goodwill until proven otherwise. Second, humans looked for common ground, shared interests or experiences that could form the basis of a connection. They found these things even in the most unlikely places. Third, humans invested time and emotional energy in relationships. They remembered details about others, followed up on previous conversations, and showed genuine interest in the lives and well-being of those around them. Fourth, humans created opportunities for positive interactions, shared meals, games, activities, conversations. They built social structures that encouraged connection. Fifth, and perhaps most importantly, humans extended their definition of us to include anyone they had connected with. Once someone was part of a human social circle, they were treated as family, with all the loyalty and care that implied. Crixel compiled her findings into a preliminary report. She presented it to the station council with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. These behaviors can be learned, she said. They are not genetic. They are cultural and psychological patterns that developed over human history. If we can understand them fully, we may be able to adapt them for other species. Counselor Threx studied the report with his small, careful eyes. You are suggesting we can teach alien species to act like humans. Not exactly. I am suggesting we can teach alien species to adopt some of the relationship-building strategies that humans use, modified for each species' psychology and culture, of course. and this would improve interspecies cooperation. I believe it would transform it. Imagine if Gathrix and Vorti could form the kind of working relationships that humans create. Imagine if ancient conflicts between species could be resolved through genuine understanding rather than just political agreements. The council was skeptical but intrigued. They approved funding for the next phase of the study, experimental applications of human pack bonding techniques to non-human subjects. Crixel was thrilled. She was also terrified. This was uncharted territory. No one had ever tried to teach alien species to bond like humans. She would need help. She found Sarah Chen in the Voreth enclosure, as expected. The dangerous predator was now so comfortable with the human that it followed her around like a pet. Other station residents had started calling it Fluffy, which Crixel found simultaneously absurd and appropriate. "I need your help," Crixel said. "I want to teach other species to do what you do." Sarah looked up from where she was brushing Fluffy's fur. "You want to teach pack bonding?" "Yes, I have documented the principles, but I do not know how to apply them. I am Gathrix. We do not bond this way naturally. I need human guidance." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, and Crixel felt something shift in her chest, a warmth she did not recognize. "Okay," Sarah said, "let's change the galaxy together." The first experiments were simple. Crixel and Sarah selected a small group of volunteers from different species, 3 Gathrix, 2 Mallory, 1 Draven, and 1 Vorti. They would be taught human pack bonding techniques and then monitored to see if they could form deeper connections with each other. Sarah started with the basics. "The first thing you need to understand," she told the group, "is that everyone wants to be seen. Everyone wants to feel like they matter. When you approach someone new, your first job is to show them that you see them as a person, not as a stranger or a potential threat." The Draven, a young male named Grath, rumbled skeptically. "Draven do not need to feel seen. We are warriors, we are strong." "Everyone needs to feel seen," Sarah said gently. "Even warriors, especially warriors maybe. Being strong doesn't mean being alone." Grath was silent, but something in his posture changed slightly. Crixel noted it down. Sarah continued with practical exercises. She had the group members pair off and spend 5 minutes asking each other questions about their lives, their interests, their families. Simple questions, but personal ones. At first, the conversations were awkward. The Gathrix clicked nervously. The Mallory gave long-winded answers that the others struggled to follow. The Vorti communicated in light patterns that required careful attention to interpret. But slowly, things began to change. Crixel was paired with a Mallory named Siriox. She asked him about his home world, and he told her about the endless grasslands where he had grown up. He asked about her hive, and she found herself describing the complex social structure of Gathrix society in ways she had never shared with an outsider before. "This is strange," she admitted. "I do not usually talk about these things." "Neither do I," Siriox replied. "But it feels good, like releasing pressure I did not know I was holding." Sarah nodded approvingly. "That's connection. That's what it feels like when you let someone in." The exercises continued over several weeks. Sarah taught the group to remember small details about each other and to follow up on previous conversations. She taught them to express appreciation and to show interest in each other's successes and struggles. She organized group activities, meals and games and collaborative projects that gave them reasons to spend time together outside of the formal sessions. Crixel watched the group transform. The Gathrix, who normally kept to their own kind, began seeking out conversations with the others. The Mallory learned to condense their responses and to ask questions instead of just answering them. The Draven warrior, Grath, started showing a gentleness that surprised everyone, including himself. The Vorti was the most remarkable change. Prisma, as James had named them, had always been isolated even among their own kind. but through patient communication and genuine interest, Sarah helped them open up. Prisma began expressing emotions more freely, sharing not just data but feelings with the group. "I did not know other species could care about us," Prisma flashed one day, their light patterns carrying deep emotion. "I thought we were too different, too alien." "Nobody is too alien to care about," Sarah said. "That's the first rule of being human." "But we are not human." "No, but you can learn from us, and we can learn from you. That's what friends do." Friends, the word kept coming up. It was such a simple concept, but for many species, it was revolutionary. The idea that you could form deep emotional bonds with beings completely unlike yourself, that you could care about them and be cared about in return, regardless of biology or culture or history. Crixel began to understand why humans were so successful at this. It was not just a skill or a strategy. It was a fundamental belief about the nature of connection, a faith that bridges could be built between any beings who were willing to try. She decided to test this belief on herself. One evening, Crixel approached Dr. Venn in his quarters. The Mallory looked surprised to see her. "Dr. Crixel, is something wrong?" "No, I wanted to talk to you, not about work, about you." Venn's large eyes blinked. "About me, why?" Crixel felt awkward, but she pushed through it. "We have worked together for 5 cycles, but I do not know anything about your life outside of research. I do not know what you enjoy, what you hope for, what you fear, and I realize that I want to know these things. You want to practice pack bonding on me. I want to be your friend." The words hung in the air between them. Venn was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he moved aside to let her enter his quarters. "I have tea," he said. "A human introduced me to it. Would you like some?" "Yes, I would like that very much." They talked for hours that night. Venn told her about his bonded pair who had died years ago, about the loneliness he had felt ever since, about his fear that he would never connect with anyone again. Crixel told him about the pressure of hive expectations, about her dream of doing something meaningful that would be remembered, about her own isolation among species who did not understand her. When she finally left his quarters, Crixel felt different, lighter, like something inside her had been waiting to be released, and now it was free. She understood now. This was what the humans did. This was why they were changing everything. She went back to her notes and began rewriting her research. It was not just about techniques or strategies. It was about vulnerability. It was about opening yourself up to another being and trusting them to be gentle with what they found. It was about love. Not romantic love, though that was part of it for some humans, but a broader love, a care for the well-being of others simply because they existed, because they were alive and trying and deserving of kindness. Humans loved easily and widely. They loved their families and friends. They loved their pets and plants. They loved strangers they met once and never saw again. They loved fictional characters and historical figures and ideas that would never love them back. And somehow, impossibly, they loved aliens. They had come to the galactic community not as conquerors or traders or refugees, but as friends. They looked at the countless species of the galaxy and saw not threats or resources, but potential connections, potential pack members. Crixel finally understood what she was studying. It was not pack bonding. It was not social behavior. It was hope. Hope that no being had to be alone. Hope that differences could be bridges instead of walls. Hope that the galaxy, vast and cold and full of strangers, could become something more like a home. She decided to put this understanding at the heart of her work. The preliminary results were promising enough that the Station Council approved an expanded program. Crixel and Sarah were authorized to train instructors from each species, who would then teach pack bonding techniques to others. The goal was to create a self-sustaining spread of human social methods throughout the station and eventually beyond. They called it the Harmony Initiative. Sarah recruited other humans to help. Marcus Webb led sessions on creating inclusive social environments. James Okonkwo taught emotional intelligence across species barriers. Other human staff members contributed their expertise in areas like conflict resolution, active listening, and community building. But the humans also learned. They discovered that some species had social wisdom that humans lacked. The Gathric's understanding of collective identity helped humans who struggled with individualism. The Mallory practice of deep patient listening improved communication for everyone. Even the isolated Vorti had insights to share about the importance of recognizing nonverbal communication. The exchange went both ways. That was important, Crixel realized. The humans were not just teaching, they were also learning. They approached other species as equals, as partners in the work of connection. This made the other species more willing to try new things. "You treat us like we have something to offer," Grath the Draven observed during one session. "Other species have always seen Draven as simple warriors. You see us as people with our own gifts." "Because you are," Sarah said. "Every species has wisdom. We're just helping everyone share it." Word began to spread about the changes happening on the station. Representatives from other research facilities and colonies requested information about the Harmony Initiative. Some were skeptical. Others were curious. A few were hostile, seeing the spread of human social patterns as a form of cultural imperialism. Crixel addressed these concerns in her reports. "The goal is not to make other species act human," she wrote. "The goal is to give every species tools for forming deeper connections, tools adapted to their own psychology and culture. Humans are guides, not models. The result should be interspecies harmony, not uniformity." This message resonated with some but not all. The galaxy was vast, and many species had reasons for keeping their distance from others. Ancient conflicts, cultural taboos, biological incompatibilities. The barriers to connection were real and could not be wished away. But on the station, things continued to improve. The Gathrix and Vorti resumed direct communication after 200 cycles of silence. A joint research project emerged that combined crystalline light science with biological click-speak, creating new methods of data transmission that neither species could have developed alone. The Mallory and the Kreth, who had avoided each other due to their ancient war, began talking through human mediators. It turned out that neither species actually remembered what the war had been about. They had just inherited the hostility from previous generations. Once they started talking, they discovered they had much in common. Even Counselor Threx, the skeptical Draven commander, began to change. Grath had been teaching him about pack bonding, about the strength that came from connection rather than isolation. The massive warrior started attending social gatherings, stiff and uncomfortable at first, but gradually relaxing as he realized that no one expected him to be anything other than himself. "I did not know," Threx said to Crixel one day, "that other species could be so interesting. I thought I knew everything I needed to know about them. I was wrong." "We are all wrong about each other," Crixel replied. "That is why this work is so important." The station became a different place over the following months. It was still a research facility, still focused on scientific work. But the atmosphere changed. There was more laughter in the corridors, more mixed species groups in the cafeteria, more collaboration and less competition. The humans were at the center of it, but they were no longer the only ones building bridges. The species they had befriended were now befriending each other. The pack had grown beyond anything Sarah or Crixel had imagined. Crixel was reviewing data one evening when Dr. Venn found her. They had become close friends over the past months, meeting regularly for tea and conversation. The formality between them had long since dissolved. "There is a message from the Galactic Council," Venn said. "They want to meet with you and Sarah. They want to discuss expanding the Harmony Initiative to all member worlds." Crixel felt a surge of hope mixed with fear. The Galactic Council oversaw hundreds of civilizations across the galaxy. If they adopted the initiative, it could change everything. But the scale was enormous, the challenges immense. "What do you think?" she asked Ven. "I think the galaxy needs this," he said. "I think we have been strangers to each other for too long, and I think if anyone can make this work, it is you and Sarah." Crixel looked at her friend, at the bond they had formed through patience and vulnerability and trust. She thought about all the connections being built around the station, all the walls coming down, all the beings discovering that they did not have to be alone. "We should tell Sarah," she said. "She will want to know." They found her in the garden dome, as usual, surrounded by a group of aliens who had become her regular companions. Grath the Draven was teaching a Gathrix child how to play a human game called Catch. Marcus Webb was trading jokes with a Mallory cook. James Okonkwo was deep in conversation with Prisma the Vorti about something only they seemed to understand. And in the middle of it all was Sarah, smiling as she watched the scene she had helped create. "We have news," Crixel said. "Big news." Sarah listened to the message from the Galactic Council. Her smile grew wider. "They want to learn," she said. "They want to connect. This is what we've been working for." "It will be hard," Crixel warned. "The galaxy is much bigger than one station. There will be resistance, setbacks, failures." "There always are," Sarah agreed. "But that's okay. We'll just keep trying, keep reaching out, keep finding common ground." That is the human way. It's everyone's way, really. Some species just forgot it for a while. Sarah looked around at the diverse group around her, at the connections that had seemed impossible just months ago. The galaxy can be a pack, one big, weird, beautiful pack. All we have to do is teach everyone how to belong. Crixel felt the warmth in her chest that she had come to recognize as affection. She had a friend now. She had many friends. And together, they were going to change the galaxy. "When do we leave?" she asked. "As soon as possible," Sarah replied. "We have a lot of friends to make." The journey to the Galactic Council headquarters took 3 weeks. Crixel, Sarah, and a small team of Harmony Initiative representatives traveled together on a diplomatic vessel. The close quarters accelerated their bonding. By the time they arrived, the group from different species had become a tight-knit unit. The Council headquarters was a massive space station at the center of the galaxy. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered there to discuss matters affecting the entire galactic community. It was the most diverse place in known space, but also one of the most formal. Species interacted through protocols and procedures, not personal connections. The contrast with the research station was stark. Here, different species kept to their own sections. Mixed groups were rare, conversations brief and businesslike. The air felt heavy with caution and mistrust. "So much potential," Sarah murmured as she watched the scene. "So many beings who could be friends if only they would try." Their presentation to the full council was scheduled for the next day. Crixel spent the night reviewing her materials, refining her arguments, trying to anticipate objections. Sarah spent the night meeting people. She wandered the station, introducing herself to anyone who would talk, asking questions, listening to answers. By morning, she had connected with representatives from dozens of species. Some were curious about the Harmony Initiative. Others were skeptical. A few were openly hostile. "You are naive," said a delegate from the Korth Collective, a species known for their isolation and suspicion of others. "Species cannot truly connect. We are too different. Your pack bonding is just a human delusion." "Maybe," Sarah replied cheerfully, "but it's a nice delusion, and it seems to work." The presentation began in the Great Assembly Hall. Thousands of delegates watched as Crixel explained the research, the methods, the results. She showed footage of the changes on the research station, the connections being formed between species who had never talked before. There were questions, many questions. Some were genuine inquiries. Others were thinly veiled attacks. The Korth delegate demanded to know how the initiative would respect species who did not want to participate. A representative from a militant alliance asked whether pack bonding could be used as a weapon of subversion. Crixel answered them all carefully and honestly. She acknowledged the limitations, the challenges, the potential for misuse. She emphasized that participation would always be voluntary, that the goal was to offer tools for connection, not to force anyone to use them. But the turning point came when Sarah spoke. She did not give a formal presentation. She simply told stories. Stories about Fluffy the Vorath, who had gone from dangerous predator to beloved companion. Stories about Grath the Draven, who had discovered that strength could include gentleness. Stories about Prisma the Vorti, who had learned that different did not mean alone. And she told stories about herself, about growing up on Earth, about the loneliness she had felt before she learned to connect with others, about the joy of finding people who cared about her and whom she cared about in return. Everyone wants to belong, she said. Everyone wants to matter to someone. These are not human needs. They are living needs. The forms are different, the expressions are different, but the core is the same. We all want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. She looked around the assembly hall at the thousands of delegates watching her. I know this seems impossible. I know some of you think I'm naive. Maybe I am. But I've seen what happens when people try. I've seen walls come down and bridges go up. I've seen enemies become friends. I've seen the impossible happen over and over just because someone was willing to reach out. The galaxy can be a lonely place, she continued. It's big and cold and full of strangers, but it doesn't have to be. We can make it different, not by changing who we are, but by sharing who we are, by opening up instead of closing off, by choosing connection over isolation. Her voice softened. I'm not asking you to be human. I'm asking you to be yourselves fully and openly and to let others do the same. I'm asking you to see the person behind the differences. I'm asking you to try. The hall was silent when she finished. Then slowly the applause began. It spread from one section to another, delegates from species who agreed and disagreed, skeptics and believers, all acknowledging something that had touched them. The vote was not unanimous. The Korth Collective and a few others abstained. Some species needed more time to consider, but the majority voted to support a pilot program. The Harmony Initiative would be expanded to 12 worlds, with full council funding and oversight. It was a beginning. Crixel and Sarah returned to the research station as heroes. Their team expanded, their resources grew, their influence spread. Over the following years, the pilot programs showed results. Species that had never worked together began collaborating. Conflicts that had seemed permanent started to resolve. The galaxy slowly began to change. There were setbacks. Some pilot programs failed. Some species were not ready. Some individuals used pack bonding techniques for manipulation rather than genuine connection. Each failure was studied, learned from, adapted to. But the successes outweighed the failures. More and more species began adopting the methods. A new generation grew up with the expectation that connection across species was normal, not exceptional. The old isolation began to fade. Crixel continued her research, documenting the evolution of interspecies relations across the galaxy. She became the leading expert on what came to be called applied harmony science, the systematic study of connection and cooperation between different beings. But she never forgot that it had started with a simple observation: a human woman feeding a dangerous alien creature, a small act of reaching out, a belief that everything could be a friend. Sarah Chen remained at the center of it all, teaching and connecting and inspiring. She grew older but never stopped making new friends. When she finally died, at an advanced age surrounded by beings from dozens of species who loved her, the galaxy mourned. But her legacy lived on. The last entry in Crixel's research journals, written years after Sarah's death, summed it up simply. The humans came to the stars as they came to everything looking for friends. They found us and taught us to find each other. The galaxy is different now. Better. Not because humans fixed us, but because they showed us how to fix ourselves. They gave us hope, and hope, it turns out, is contagious. Sarah Chen started something that will outlive all of us. Someday, beings will look back at this time and wonder what the galaxy was like before the humans came. They will not understand the loneliness, the isolation, the fear of others that we lived with for so long. They will take connection for granted. And that is the greatest gift the humans gave us. Not pack bonding, not social techniques, not harmony protocols. They gave us a galaxy where belonging is normal, where friendship is expected, where no one has to be alone. That is the human legacy. That is what they meant when they said they wanted to be our friends. I am glad they found us. I am glad I found them. And I am glad, most of all, that we found each other. The journal ended there, but the story did not. Across the galaxy, billions of beings continued to reach out, to connect, to belong. They learned from each other, grew with each other, loved each other in ways that would have seemed impossible before the humans came. The galaxy became a pack. And it was beautiful.